In the last episode, Princess Precious, Amaka's evil sister, and Farouk, the leader of the Oshimaries warriors, prepared to raid Dyke the hunter's house, where she thought he and her friend Elizabeth would be hiding, in a desperate bid to kill him and stop him from ever marrying her older sister Amaka, helping Amaka steal the throne from her. That morning, Precious took the Oshimaries warriors and charged toward Dyke's house in a quest to eliminate him once and for all. When they arrived at his house, they banged at his door, knocking aggressively. "Hunter Dyke! Hunter Dyke! Come out, you traitor! Your fate has been decided for your treachery. You thought you could escape us. Well, you couldn't. Come out and I promise your death would be swift," Precious exclaimed, as Farouk and the Oshimaries stood behind her in support. After Precious spoke, there was no response from the door for several minutes. So Farouk said to Precious, "Princess Precious, the hunter is obviously a coward and is afraid to come out and face us. Let us break down his door and drag the coward out in disgrace." "All right, we would do just that," Precious responded. So with their great strength, Farouk and the Oshimaries broke down Dyke's door and raided the inner chambers of his house. They did this for several minutes only to find nothing inside. Not a single soul. Indeed, Dyke wasn't at home when they were knocking. But the house wasn't totally empty. You see, after the Oshimaries raided the house from the frontage and found nothing, not Dike, Elizabeth, or any incriminating element, they went to his backyard where he cooked, and it was there that they found some suspicious artifacts left behind. There was a kettle that was still exhuming faint clouds of steam from its head. The kettle was placed on top of a firewood burner right in front of the backyard. And right there in front of the kettle, there were 2 cups half filled with tea, placed in front of 2 sits. When Precious saw this, she immediately got down from her horse to go and investigate the matter. She touched the body of the kettle and that of the cups and noticed that they were still warm to the touch. She then exclaimed loudly, "They knew! They knew! Who knew?" Farouk asked in confusion, "What are you talking about?" Precious then responded, "Dyke and Elizabeth. They both knew we were coming and probably fled the scene as soon as they could." "How could you possibly know that?" Farouk asked. "Well, dummy, there are 2 teacups that are still warm and a firewood cooker that still has red coals on it. What else do you think?" Precious responded, Oh, now I see. But how did they even know that we were coming?" Farouk asked Precious. Precious then responded, "That is an excellent question. I only told you about this plan last night, and then you informed your warriors. So only one of 2 things happened. Your warriors are all traitors, or I'm a fool for trusting you with this plan, because you in fact are the traitor." "Come on, Princess, don't be like that. They could have discovered that we were coming from a wide variety of sources. We don't exactly do quiet entries, you know. They could have heard our footsteps as we were coming and ran away." Farouk responded to Precious, "Excuses, excuses, excuses. We had 1 shot to take down my sister's lover with the element of surprise, and as far as I am concerned, our failure is your fault." As both Precious and Farouk were yelling at each other, one of the Oshimaries warriors heard a faint sound coming from something in front of Dyke's backyard, like the sound of someone wheezing coming from a close distance. He paused and glared over the side the noise was coming from, but couldn't pinpoint where it was from. Right in his front in the backyard, there was a cooking hut, a well, and a couple of tiny bamboo shades where foodstuffs were stored. The noise seemed to be coming from one of these places, but he didn't know exactly where. Then he heard it again. "Shuz! Shuz! Eliza!" As soon as he heard this, his suspicions were confirmed. He alerted Princess Precious and Farouk. "Excuse me, Your Highness, Leader Farouk, but I think I hear something or someone close by," the warrior said. "Hear what? What are you blabbing about?" Princess Precious rudely interrupted. "Well, I think I hear them, Dike and Elizabeth. Maybe they are hiding somewhere in Dyke's backyard." The warrior responded to Precious. "But we've already searched his entire house, yet we found nothing, not a trace of them." Farouk said to the warrior. "You are correct, great leader," the warrior responded, "but remember, we never checked the outside. If you recall, we found 2 teacups that were still warm and burning charcoal that was yet to go off. That could only mean one thing, And what would that be, ooh, wise warrior? Precious asked in a sarcastic voice. It could mean that if at all they left and they knew we were coming, they didn't get the information on time and they probably didn't have enough time to evade the scene. So what are you saying? Farouk asked. I'm saying that they could be hiding somewhere close and might not have left the compound at all. The warrior replied, Farouk. As soon as Precious understood the analysis made by the warrior, she quickly instructed. Well, what are you all waiting for? Start searching the foolish hunter's yard. So all the warriors, including Farouk and Precious, began searching Dyke's backyard rigorously. They searched the entire compound, knocking down the cooking hut and the bamboo shelters. And with each search, they were eliminating possible locations where Dike and Elizabeth could have been hiding. As this was happening, Dike and Elizabeth were hearing the tremors that were induced by Elizabeth and the Oshimaries warriors pacing around Dyke's compound. And the reason they could perceive this was because they were literally 100 feet below the surface, underground, floating in the water, and trying their best not to move or make the slightest sounds, in order not to give their location away. Now you see the day before Precious and the Oshimaries warriors raid Dyke's house. Elizabeth had followed Dike home to prepare for the journey to the Agba evil forest. When they both arrived at his house, Dike quickly went in to change to his casual clothes, so he could go to the kitchen and prepare food for Elizabeth, his guest. While he did this, Elizabeth sat calmly just beside his house as she observed how old and crooked it looked, like it had been around for a while. As she was still staring around, observing his compound, Dike came out with a cup full of warm water and a plate filled with cola nuts, as a welcome appetizer. Immediately Elizabeth saw what Dike brought. She pretended not to be interested, saying, "Oh, Dike, this is so thoughtful, but you didn't have to bring this for me. I am already full." As Dike heard this, he chuckled and responded to her, "Oh, please, Elizabeth, drop the home training aside and eat. I know you are not really full, you are just saying so to be polite. Or have you forgotten that I spent the better part of today talking with you at your house?" After Elizabeth heard what Dike said, she equally chuckled and then blushed. She then responded, Okay, you got me, but tell me you wouldn't have done the same if you were in my shoes." Dike immediately looked at Elizabeth with a stoic face and smirked. He then responded, "Well, if it were me, I actually would have immediately rushed any food that is given to me for free. You see, as a hunter, you learn to cherish the slightest food you can find because you don't know when the next meal will come." "Wow, that's deep," Elizabeth responded to Dike in a calm voice. "Well, it was my grandfather who taught it to me," Dike said to Elizabeth. Elizabeth then responded, "Wow, it then means your grandfather must have been a very wise and great man." "Wait, you don't know him?" Dike suddenly asked Elizabeth. She then responded immediately, "No, I don't know. Should I know him or something?" she said in a confused tone. After she asked this, Dike then looked at her in awe and slight disappointment, and he now responded, "Well, it's not like you should know him, like it's a criterion. It's just that I thought my grandfather's reputation went without saying. Guess everyone stopped caring about my family after I, the last of my lineage, ended up being a mere hunter, as opposed to my legendary grandfather." After Elizabeth heard Dike said this, she then slowly said to him in a calm tone, "Don't talk down on yourself, Dike. Being a hunter is a noble job. Not everyone can do it. To be honest, I personally admire hunters. The way they risk their lives to earn their daily meal. Their courage in challenging hefty beasts in the forest. Not everyone can do it, so you being a hunter means you are special." As Elizabeth said this, Dike turned to her in remembrance and responded, "You really think that of me?" "Yes, I do," Elizabeth immediately responded. Dike now continued talking. "Funny, someone dear to me used to give me the exact same compliments about me being a hunter," he said in remembrance. Elizabeth then responded, "Oh really? What a coincidence. You see, if two people are saying this, then it means it must be true, huh?" "Yeah, you are probably right," Dike responded to her. Elizabeth then became curious all of a sudden and inquired from Dike, This person who is dear to you that told you this, was it Princess Amaka? She asked with a shaky voice. Dyke then immediately responded, yes, it was. He then immediately followed up on the question and asked, how did you know she was the one who complimented me in a similar manner? Elizabeth then gazed into the distance and then turned to Dyke and responded, you know, Princess Amaka and I were once inseparable friends. We played together, got into trouble together, and even gossiped a lot together. You don't say. Dyke responded to Amaka in a surprised tone. Yeah. Elizabeth replied, and one of the things we discussed during that time was our mutual adoration for hunters. She said. Oh wow, Dyke replied. Well, this puts things in perspective, he then asked. But Elizabeth, if you and Princess Amaka were this close to one another, however, did you guys stop being friends? More or less, you guys became so torn apart that you even once championed a plan to almost have her killed. Immediately Elizabeth heard this, she shouted, hey, I never actually wanted her to get killed. I just thought maybe Precious would wish that she never got married to you, or that the king would love her more than Amaka. But things just went out of hand. Okay? Dyke then responded in an indifferent tone. Alright, whatever you say, Elizabeth. Then Elizabeth responded in a defeated voice. But you are right, as I and Amaka were so close when we were little, it only begs the question of what actually happened between us. The truth is, to be honest, I can't really pinpoint how it happened. All I know is that as close as I was to her, I once approached the royal palace for a favor once I was in pressing need. You see, my family was about to be blown out of the water because of a financial crisis we faced as our farms kept being attacked by savages all of a sudden. This sudden crisis cost us our livelihood, and so we were fast plunged into a life of abject poverty. One day, I decided enough was enough and tried to use my connections with the royal family, Princess Amaka, to alleviate our predicament once and for all. Even though I had swore never to use my affiliations for personal gain prior. That day, I went to the royal palace. But to my greatest surprise, the guards had informed me that Princess Amaka wanted nothing to do with me because of my family's condition. I was hungry, helpless, and desperate, and I just got info that my best friend wanted nothing to do with me while I was at my lowest point. Did you believe what those guards told you? Because that doesn't sound like Princess Amaka one bit. Dyke suddenly interrupted Elizabeth. Elizabeth then responded to him. Well, to be honest, initially I didn't believe them one bit, and I challenged the authenticity of what they had said. But it was not until Princess Precious showed up and the guards repeated exactly what they had told me, in front of her, without flinching. That very moment, that was when I knew it was real. Dyke then exclaimed in a loud tone, I can't believe it. So Princess Amaka can be so heartless. Is that even possible? I've never seen that side of her in our relationship. Elizabeth then replied to him, well, if it makes you feel any better, that day I was as shocked as you. And yeah, that was the day we stopped being close friends permanently. Dyke then said to her with a reassuring tone, well, Elizabeth, I may not be able to believe that Princess Amaka could be so cruel without a reason. I guess I would have to ask her that when I see her again in person. But if you say in all honesty that this was your last experience with her, then I understand why you left and why you later grew to hate her. Elizabeth then replied, Dyke. Thank you, Dyke, you have no idea what you saying that to means to me. You are welcome, Elizabeth. Dyke responded to her. Now, immediately after this exchange of pleasantries, a bewildering expression overshadowed Elizabeth's face, and Dyke could notice it. So he asked in great concern, he asked her, Elizabeth, why is that look on your face? I thought you were happy that I didn't think of you as a bad person after you cut Princess Amaka off for what you said you did to her. Elizabeth then replied in a slow and almost sickly voice, Yes, Dyke, I am happy about that. But something about how I and Princess Amaka ended things has been bothering my mind in light of recent events. Dyke then leaned in closer in curiosity and asked her, "And what would that be?" Elizabeth then stuttered a bit and then said in a shaky voice, "Well, there is a part of the story I don't tell people, and to be honest, I don't even tell myself." "What is it, Elizabeth? Speak your mind. Lay out your thoughts. You know I won't judge you." "All right," Elizabeth replied as she immediately drew her breath and started talking. "I didn't actually give Amaka a chance to explain herself in the whole matter. In fact, everything I know about that day she rejected me, I heard from the mouths of the guards I spoke to, and Princess Precious." Dyke then immediately interrupted her. "Wait, did Precious ever repeat what the guards had said to you about Amaka? Or did the guards just say it to you in her presence?" he asked curiously. Elizabeth then responded, "Yes, in fact, Precious reinforced what the guards said and even made it look like Amaka had always been that type of wicked person in the past and I wasn't able to see it. But I knew Amaka, and as far as I am concerned, her hostile behavior towards me was something new, irrespective of the circumstances. So Elizabeth, what are you actually saying?" Dyke asked in a curious tone. "What I'm saying is that I never entertained the possibility that all that could have been all a setup by Princess Precious to remove me as Princess Amaka's only friend," Elizabeth said in a quick tone. "How so?" Dyke immediately asked. "Why would she do all that just to make her senior sister lonely?" Elizabeth then responded. "That day after Precious briefed me on how wicked Amaka was, she promised to do what Princess Amaka allegedly could not and solve my family's problem once and for all. But in exchange, I was to cut off all ties with Princess Amaka whatsoever. It was like a transactional affair. My family problem would be solved, but only if I cut off my closest friend. I literally was boxed into a corner both physically, emotionally, and financially. I didn't even have time to think. It was actually surreal. And ever since then, I became the pet of Princess Precious, and so did my parents. We became subservient to her, because, well, she was the one who saved us from poverty. But after hearing what that guard said before he died, I could only wonder, was it all a..." Dyke then immediately interrupted her. "What guard? What are you talking about?" Elizabeth was immediately stricken with shame as she began sobbing. "It's all my fault. It was all my fault," she cried as Dyke watched her in utter confusion. Dyke then awkwardly burst out into uncontrollable laughter. "Ha ha ho ha ha. Oh God. Not this again. Ha ha ha." As this was happening, Elizabeth was gripped with shock and discomfort. She looked up to Dyke's face only to see him laughing hysterically, but couldn't understand what exactly was making him laugh. She then asked him in great concern, "You think this is funny? Unbelievable. Here I am pouring out my heart to you, and you are over there having the time of your life. I hope I made your evening at least," she exclaimed. Dyke then turned to her, while still laughing out loud, and responded, "No, Elizabeth, ha ha ha. I'm not laughing at you. Then what in God's name is cracking you up at this very moment?" Elizabeth responded to Dyke in a harsh tone. Dyke then looked at her calmly and responded, "It's just that Princess Amaka and I were sharing stories almost exactly like this the other night, and it got to a point where she was also skeptical about what she had allegedly done in the past and was scared of sharing it with me. It's actually crazy how much you and Princess Amaka are alike." Elizabeth then looked at Dyke and then forced a smile through her frown and responded to him, "Well, I guess we are. So what was it about that guard that you were saying?" Dyke then asked her. Elizabeth then responded, "Well, that day Princess Precious and I went to my witch Aunt Agatha, the most powerful witch doctor in all the neighboring kingdoms, to cast a spell against Princess Amaka. we were met with an unforeseen hurdle. You see, Princess Precious initially wanted to kill her sister once and for all, preventing her from ascending the throne at all. Unfortunately for Princess Precious, the gods frowned upon striking dead a member of the royal family, with royal blood flowing through their veins. But Precious was persistent, and so my aunt gave her a way to still carry out the ritual. And so to strike down her senior sister, Princess Amaka, even with her royal blood. So my aunt requested the heads of 12 virgins within a span of 2 days, as sacrifice for the ritual, to force the hands of the gods. That is crazy, Dyke interrupted abruptly, with a childlike voice. Yeah, it really was, Elizabeth responded to him. It was so crazy that even Princess Precious was unable to go ahead with the ritual. Now, personally, in spite of any past qualms I had with Princess Amaka, I never wanted to see her die. So I brought forth an alternate plan before Precious came up with another rash plan against her sister. I was the one who suggested the plan to shift the king's heart from loving Amaka to Precious. What? Dyke exclaimed. So that was why you said you believe that King David actually sent those bounty hunters. He was brainwashed. By you. And Princess Amaka. Calm down, Dyke. I already feel like trash for what I did. And I thought you said you won't judge me for things I did in my past. Well, yeah, I said I won't judge you. But with what you are saying now, it basically means you were actively involved in why Amaka is wasting away in God knows where now. Because you gave her witch of a sister the brilliant idea to turn her father's love against her. How can you be so cruel? Dyke shouted at Elizabeth, Indiana, a loud, combative voice. Immediately, Elizabeth burst out into genuine sorrowful tears. I know. I am a terrible person. I know I deserve to be thrown to the wolves for what I and my family have done. But please just tolerate my presence for a short while, so I can help save Princess Amaka and atone for my sins. Please, Dyke, I beg of you, don't cast me away. You are my only hope of redemption. She said this as she grabbed Dyke's legs as she was still crying. Dyke then drew in a deep breath and, while looking down at her, asked her in a calm, stoic voice, "Earlier when we met, you said that because of your actions, the 3 guards who escorted you were all dead because of what you did. What did you mean by that? Answer me now, so I can consider forgiving you when I know all the sins you have committed." Elizabeth, while still sobbing at his feet, responded to him. After I suggested the plan to sway the king's heart in favor of Precious, Agatha demanded 2 human heads to carry out the sacrifice. And that was when it happened. Princess Precious showed me her true color there and then. She offered the 2 guards that escorted us to her shrine to be used as the sacrifice for the ritual. She lured them in unsuspiciously and then led them to Agatha to be slaughtered. I tried to stop her, but my aunt conspired with Princess Precious and bound me in chains. I watched as the guards fell one after the other, and at that moment, as the second guard was about to die, he muttered to me that it was all a lie. At first, I was thrown off by what he meant by that, but looking closely at his face for a second time, I realized that he was the same guard that stopped me at the gates of the palace. That day, I ended things with Princess Amaka. He was the one who told me Princess Amaka wanted nothing to do with me, and then he repeated the same things he told me in front of Princess Precious. And I believed them, which makes me wonder, could he have meant that what he told me that day about Princess Amaka not wanting anything to do with me was all a lie? Dyke exclaimed, "That girl, that Precious. She truly is a demon after all, isn't she? He said. What do you mean by that? Elizabeth then asked. Don't you get it, Elizabeth? It was all precious. It has always been precious. She was the one who sent those savages to infiltrate and destroy your farm so that your family would become poor. She was the one who bribed the palace guards to lie to you about Princess Amaka's reaction to your family's condition. She engineered the whole bloody thing to separate you from Amaka so that her senior sister would always be lonely. As soon as Dyke said this, Elizabeth's face was filled with confusion and despair. She then shouted out loud in a crumbling voice, "But why?" "Jealousy," Dyke exclaimed. "Some people are just born with the disease of jealousy, and it consumes them their whole lives. I believe Princess Precious is one of those people. Killing human beings, manipulation, hatred. It's all out there in black and blue." Elizabeth then interrupted Dyke's monologue. "Then we have to stop her," she shouted. "And how exactly do you suggest we do that, huh?" Dyke immediately asked her. "Well, we can tell the villagers that she has brainwashed the king and is holding the crowned princess hostage." Elizabeth responded to Dyke. Dyke shook his head in disappointment and then said to her in a sarcastic voice, "And do you think they would believe peasants like us, accusing a member of the royal family of such grievous acts? We would be lucky if they wouldn't feed us to lions for that type of treason. So what are we going to do about Princess Precious? If she is left unchecked, she can destroy the whole kingdom. Or even worse," Elizabeth said to Dyke. Dyke then responded, "We would do the only thing we can do. We would do everything positive to save Princess Amaka from the clutches of her sister, by breaking the spell from the king's heart in the Agba evil forest. We would do whatever it takes, and hope to God that, when free, my love Princess Amaka would be able to put a stop to her sister's madness once and for all," Dyke said in a reassuring tone. Elizabeth then glared at him in admiration, and then commented, "Now I see why Princess Amaka fell head over heels for you. You are so confident and recurring," she said as she stood up. "Really?" Dyke responded. "I always thought it was because of my dazzling looks." "Haha," he chuckled. Elizabeth then stared at him in slight annoyance and rolled her eyes. Dyke then busted out in laughter. "This girl, why are you always so dramatic?" "Haha," he chuckled even more. He then came to an abrupt end to his laughter and then looked at Elizabeth intensely and started talking. "Elizabeth, I'm sorry the way I yelled at you earlier, even though I promised that I wouldn't overreact. I was just surprised by the whole thing. A part of me hoped that you were never involved in betraying Amaka because I've come to know you as a kind person." "Really, and why is that?" Elizabeth asked. "Well, for starters, you saved me from nearly biting the dust back at the river separating our village and the Agba evil forest. You took care of me at your house, a stranger for that matter. That shows me that you have good in your heart. Tons of them. And I'll be naive to overlook all these good things I've seen from you and judge you solely on the mistakes that you have made in the past." Dyke responded to Elizabeth. "Thank you, Dyke," Elizabeth responded to him. "I needed to hear this, especially coming from you. Alright, enough with the patting ourselves on the back. If we want to save my love Princess Amaka, we have to draft out a solid plan of maneuvering the harsh terrains of the Agba evil forest, especially as we are going to be going on this journey alone, right?" Elizabeth yelled in correspondence. "All right," Dyke said. "First, we would have come up with a plan to pass through the Sea of Serpents." Dyke mumbled as they discussed all night on how they were going to brave the journey that lies ahead of them. After they finished discussing, they both went to sleep, Now the following day, early in the morning, Dyke could hear footsteps coming towards his house as he was at sleep. At first, he thought he was dreaming, so he shook off the thought and went ahead to boil tea for himself and Elizabeth, so they could have something in their stomach before they began their journey. As he poured the tea from the kettle into 2 cups in front of his yard, at that very moment that was when he heard the battle cry of a certain set of armed warriors, in combination with the footsteps he had been hearing all morning. He knew it was no dream, for he has heard those marching footsteps of warriors on horseback before, and he has heard their cry not too long ago too. So Dyke immediately rushed out of the kitchen in his yard, back to the bedroom where he and Elizabeth slept, and began tapping Elizabeth, who was still asleep, rigorously in a bid to wake her up. "Elizabeth, wake up! Wake up! The Oshimaries are upon us. They are coming to this house right now. Elizabeth, wake, please wake up, we have to leave immediately." With each tap, and with each minute that passed, the footstep of the warriors' horses kept drawing nearer and nearer. Then all of a sudden, in a burst of shock, Elizabeth woke up from her bed all sweaty and mumbled, "Warriors? Oshimaries? Mommy, please, I don't want to hear more stories." "It's no story," Dyke yelled at her in a loud tone, and with one final tap woke Elizabeth up. As Elizabeth woke up, Dyke grabbed her hand and swooped her off the bed. He dragged her with him as he ran towards the closest shelter from those savage warriors, his old dirty well in the yard of his house. On the way, Elizabeth asked him with a confused and disorientated demeanor, "Dyke, where are you taking me? What is going on?" Dyke then responded in a tense voice as they were still running. The Oshimaries, those warriors that attacked me and Amaka, they are upon us." And then all of a sudden they arrived at the well. Dyke then asked Elizabeth in an authoritative voice, "All right, we are here. You can jump in now." "Jump in where?" Elizabeth asked in a defiant, sarcastic voice, as she glared at him and glared at the well in front of them. "Please, Elizabeth, you have to jump in so that I can jump in too. It's the only way I can see to evade those warriors. Do you want to live or die?" he asked in all seriousness. Elizabeth then responded, "Of course, I don't want to die, that is why I'm not jumping. Do you know how deep that well could be? Do you know whether there are wild animals inside? Please, I rather take my chances with whatever danger you said is coming towards us." Dyke then responded hastily, "Oh please, Elizabeth, we don't have time to think about all that now." So he then made up his mind and pushed Elizabeth by force into the well, and right after that, he jumped into the well as well. And as he got there, he held her mouth tightly from reacting to what had happened, so that she wouldn't make any noise to draw attention to them. As just that second, they jumped. Princess Precious and the Oshimaries appeared right in front of his doorstep, as he said they would. Dyke and Elizabeth would successfully evade them up until one of the guards drew suspicions to the well where they were hiding in. As Precious and the Oshimaries searched the compound, it got to a point where Precious walked up to the well where Dyke and Elizabeth were hiding. Both Dyke and Elizabeth's hearts began racing as they knew that they had been spotted. As soon as Princess Precious looks down the well, she is going to spot us, they both thought in their hearts. But as Precious drew near about to peep down the well, Elizabeth could spot her hair go down before her hair did. And in that very moment, in a burst of desperation, she held Dyke's body tightly and muttered an incantation. "Lamuscus, Sava, Inficidiatus." And in that very instant they both vanished into thin air. Unsuspecting Precious would look down into the well and find nothing but water. Immediately Precious was stricken with great frustration and anger. Both her and the warriors have been searching the whole compound for Dike and Elizabeth only to come up empty up until that point. So she took out her frustration on the warrior who recommended the search. "You fool!" she yelled at him. "So you have successfully wasted all our time on this wild goose chase. You Oshimary warriors are all incompetent. You can't even live up to your name," Precious shouted. "But my liege, it was only a logical suggestion to search their compound for them. If at LL they were still hiding close by." The warrior tried to defend himself. "Shut up," Precious silenced him. "You uncultured swine. How dare you talk to you princess and future ruler like that? You Oshimaries all make me sick. All of you, get out of my sight. All of you, leave. I'll find those traitors myself," she said as she cast them away. Shortly after this, all the Oshimary warriors departed the scene of Dyke House, back to their camp, as Princess Precious sped off on her horse back to the royal palace. As all this was happening, Farouk, the leader of the Oshimaries, followed Precious back to the palace without her permission. And he had observed how she lashed out at his warriors, and he could sense that she was frustrated and needed his company. So he continued to trail her on horseback as they both rode towards the royal palace. When they arrived at the palace gates, Farouk called her name out loud, while he gasped for his breath. "Princess Precious, my love, why are you angry? Why did you lash out at my warriors like that? That was cruel and unnecessary. Those warriors were all putting in their best, and you just spat in their faces like they were just joking around. How dare you?" Farouk asked in genuine anger. "How dare I?" Precious asked in utter surprise. "You had one mission and one mission only: get Princess Amaka and wipe out whoever she was with. You wiped out the palace guards, you didn't spare any one of them. But that bastard hunter, the one person I hate almost as much as my beast of a sister, you let him escape. Now he has aligned with that traitor Elizabeth. Only God knows what they are up to. Their working together could jeopardize everything I have worked so hard for." Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Princess Precious burst out into genuine tears. Farouk then immediately rushed and held her passionately in a bid to calm her down. He then asked, "My love, why are you crying? Nothing has happened yet. You have your sister locked up. The hunter is on the run, and the king is in your grasp. Please just set your heart to rest." Precious then looked up at Farouk and then responded, "I would rest when I have the hunter's head on a silver plate. Farouk, my love, if you truly love me, you would promise me that you won't rest either until that happens." "Precious, but..." Farouk responded to Precious in a shaky voice. "No buts, my love. You said you love me, right? Now promise me you would do anything you can to kill that bastard hunter and my traitor of a friend Elizabeth. Whatever it takes." Farouk then responded in a deep forced tone. "All right, my love, whatever it takes. I'm glad," Precious responded. "Now wait for me here, let me go and make sure my sister is rotting hopelessly in that palace cell. All right? All right, my love." So Farouk stayed put at the palace gates and kept himself busy by conversing with the palace guards, while Precious proceeded into the palace prisons to taunt her sister. Meanwhile, as all this was happening, Elizabeth and Dyke were miles away, at the river demarcating their village and the Agba evil forest, and they got into a heated argument about what had happened back at the well at Dyke's house. "What in heaven's name did you do to me, Elizabeth? Answer me. What are you? Who are you, in fact? You are not talking. Why are you not talking?" Dyke exclaimed in a loud voice. "It's not that easy for me, Dyke. Please just calm down." Elizabeth equally responded to him in a loud tone. Calm down? Dyke replied in a sarcastic voice. In the short time that we have known each other, you have dropped bombshells upon bombshells upon bombshells. And to be honest, I have accepted all your rough edges. But now, I just basically teleported from the well in my house to this lake demarcating our village and the Agba evil forest. In mere seconds, because you muttered some gibberish at the last second. And now I'm here, you are looking at me and I am looking at you. And you can't even muster up an explanation for what had just happened and you expect me to be calm? Dyke said to Elizabeth in a harsh and endearing tone. Alright, I'll explain myself, but please, we are here in front of the Agba evil forest. Let's start moving. I can explain on the way. As soon as she said this, Dyke walked past her with scary speed and started heading towards the forest alone. He then yelled from afar, "You better start talking." Elizabeth then replied to him in a sharp tone, "Hey, please, wait up," as she ran after him. As they walked into the forest, the evening had come, and everywhere started becoming dark. Dyke kept walking into the forest at full speed, but Elizabeth kept trailing him from behind, trying to catch up with him at some point, but to no avail. As she walked fast, all she could think of was her past, her family, and the real reason they had to leave the Apama kingdom. Burdened by all these thoughts, she opted to shift her focus to Precious. What is she up to now? Elizabeth thought hardly. If it weren't for that wicked girl, none of this would have happened. Meanwhile, as she thought deeply about the plans and whereabouts of Princess Precious, miles away back at the royal palace, Precious was on her way down the palace stairs to the dungeon that held her elder sister Amaka. That my fool of a sister! They must have planned this, her and that foolish hunter. I feel something brewing in my gut. The calm before the storm. No, I know it. Let me go and make it clear to her that she is never going to see the light of the day, no matter what they had in plan. Princess Precious said to herself as she walked down to the palace dungeons, with every step of hers trembling with mighty rage. Her sister, Princess Amaka, who had been in a trance-like state, bound in chains, could hear the clinging of her royal shoes and immediately woke up. Could that be my father? She asked herself. No, those footsteps are too timid for my hefty father. It must be a lady's shoe of some sort. But that clinging, like gold embedded into the sole of the shoe. Wait, only one person I can remember wore that shoe. Amaka spoke to herself in a near-deranged voice. Her eyes glared in remembrance, and all of a sudden, in that moment, Precious, her younger sister, appeared in front of her jail cell. Immediately, Princess Amaka was stricken with a great feeling of disappointment, as Precious, her sister, was the last person she wanted to see. While Precious stared down at her sister, Amaka bound in chains, with an expression of disgust written all over her face. Then she started talking in a calm, sinister tone. "Oh sister, how have the mighty fallen? Look at you, dirty, ugly, and smelling. You've been rotting well in this cell, I can see. I'm glad you've begun settling into your new hope. 'Cause make no mistake, dear sister, you are never seeing the outskirts of this cell ever again," Precious said to her sister in a mocking tone, and then paused to smirk and stare at Amaka with deadly satisfaction. Then all of a sudden, Amaka, who had been looking down to the floor all this while, too angry to look her evil little sister in the face, began whispering slowly in an airy voice. "You monster," Amaka whispered. "What have I ever done to you to deserve all this? Ever since we were little, I have always prioritized your happiness over mine, Precious. You were perfect, slim, non-muscular, and beautiful. You were everything I wanted to be. So I cherished you, I protected you. Only for you to turn into this, your greed and jealousy have consumed you. "Oh please," Precious interrupted in a rude tone. "Please stop this, your song and dance of me being jealous of you. I think we are all tired of hearing you go on and on about how jealous I am of you, when really, as you just admitted, you have been the one who has always been jealous of me, as you've just clearly stated now. What are you doing here, Precious? Here to gloat, here to wallow in what you think is victory?" Princess Amaka asked in an unbothered, condescending voice. It was as if she had lost all emotions and all her kind bubbling energy. She continued to speak to Precious, as Precious looked at her in shock. "Well, if you came here to gloat, well, please do it quickly and get out of my sight. I no longer wish to see you in my life again, 'cause I'm done with you, permanently, since the love I thought we shared as sisters in spite of our differences always meant nothing to you, even though I always hoped deep down it didn't. Then I think it's time we both start acting accordingly to each other. Now you little devil, get out of my sight. Monster!" Princess Amaka yelled at Precious like she wanted to devour her, with her eyes filled with a newfound hatred for her baby sister. Her eyes were glittering bright red and filled with dampened tears, as she yelled with veins in her throat. It was a transformative moment for Amaka, where she finally realized that there was no redeeming her beloved sister. But in that moment, Princess Precious went from being shocked to bursting out in evil laughter. "Ha ha ha! Oh, this is hilarious! Ha ha ha! You just made my day, Amaka! Ha ha ha!" Then Amaka turned to her in shock and disgust and asked her slowly, "Do you think this is funny? Huh? You think all this is funny to you? You bastard! I knew it. What more do you expect from the devil incarnate herself? On. Big sister. Stop it, you are making me blush. Ha ha ha." Princess Precious replied to Amaka with mocking laughter. She then began talking. "I have waited all these years for you to finally say those words to me. I hate you. I have waited for you to say those words to me because that is exactly how I feel about you. You sit there in your disgraceful state, judging me, thinking by spewing out some makeshift insults that it would get me in some kind of emotional frenzy. And what? I'll get emotional and release you. Think again." As she said this, Amaka's facial expression went from pure anger to having some glimmers of fear as Precious spoke. Precious had seemed to deflect all the emotions from the monologue that Princess Amaka just went on, and it threw Princess Amaka off, realizing how cold and emotionless her little sister was. But Precious wasn't done just yet. She kept talking. "Oh Amaka, my foolish sister, you have always not been that bright, right from when we were kids. But somehow, Mommy and Daddy loved you more than I. They treated you like a special little gem. You are delusional, Precious. You hear me? You are delusional. That never happened." Princess Amaka immediately interrupted. Shut up your dirty mouth. How would you know? When you were always playing the little Miss Damsel in the distress act for Mommy and Daddy. Do you know how that feels, being born as the second child and literally being the second place in my family's heart? And the painful part is that if you were better than me, I would have understood. But you were not. You were big, ugly, and muscular. I was beautiful and charming. You were hated and rejected by most people, especially men, while I was loved and adored by everyone, even my adversaries. But yet you were still the star child. Princess Amaka then hastily interrupted Precious's monologue. You fool, your eyes are closed 'cause you don't want to see the truth. She replied, Precious. How dare you? Precious immediately responded to her with a shout. Princess Amaka then replied, How dare I what? Look you in the eye and say the truth to your face. Have you ever stopped to consider that the reason Mommy and Daddy paid special attention to me was because I wasn't meeting up with you? That you were already perfect. And even though I wasn't ever gonna be like my younger sister, they wanted to make me feel just as loved. You tell yourself whatever helps you sleep well at night, big sister. Princess Precious rudely interrupted. But if you ever stop to think for a second, you would realize that as a little child, all I saw was Mommy and Daddy preferred big sister to me. That I was nothing, I wasn't the heir, I wasn't the favorite child like most last-borns were. I was nothing, just a standby, spare heir to the throne, only to become of importance if something happened to the original. So that's how you really feel? Princess Amaka interrupted her monologue. You think you weren't loved, you feel you weren't viewed as important. But you were the one between the both of us who actually got to live the princess lifestyle. Princess Amaka said. Precious replied almost immediately. Oh, please shut your mouth. This again. This your song and dance about how better I am than you. You sneaky little animal. You and Father used this cover story to try to distract me from the fact that no matter how beautiful, perfect, and complete I am, I would never be the ruler of this land. But you would, and I would never have the full love and admiration of our parents. But now, through my own endeavors, I have set myself on the path to achieving all these things regardless. As she said this, Amaka was taken back and then, with a quivering frown on her lips, asked Precious in deadly seriousness. So, is that why you bewitched Father? As soon as she said this, Precious was shocked and shivered the slightest bit. Then she replied to Amaka almost immediately. Watch yourself, Amaka. What exactly are you accusing me of? Precious said with fear in her eyes. Amaka, while staring at Precious, could notice this slight change and then responded in confidence. So my suspicions are true. What are you going on about, you beast? Precious responded. That's right, Precious, I saw it in full display yesterday. The way Dad spoke to me with such hatred. I have only known one person to ever carry such hatred in their heart. And that person is you. You did something to him, and very soon whatever you did would come back to bite you. Just look at how far you have gone to achieve your flimsy dream of becoming the ruler of this kingdom. Have you ever asked yourself if it is worth it anymore? After all this, what type of ruler do you think you would be if at all you succeed? A ruler that bullies her subjects. A ruler that sends mercenaries to kill anyone who opposes her authority. If you are going to be that kind of ruler, then you won't have much of a kingdom to rule after a couple of weeks. Ha ha ha! Ha ha ha! Princess Precious began laughing hysterically as she paced around with heavy steps. She then began talking. Oh sister, who is the bitter one now? She said to Princess Amaka in an unbothered tone, like everything Amaka had just said didn't move her the slightest bit. Then surprisingly, Princess Amaka also busted out laughing in a mocking tone. Ha ha ha, she laughed. When Precious saw this, she became slightly thrown off and then asked in an insulting tone, Hey beast, why are you laughing? What is so funny? Oh, it's nothing. I just realized that you are a validation vampire hiding behind the mask of an oppressed child. Ha ha ha. Princess Amaka responded to Precious. The Precious replied, How dare you? Princess Amaka then replied, How dare I what? Call you out on your nonsense? Then Precious now shouted in pure hatred, You selfish animal. Whatever I am, whatever events that led up to today, it's all your fault, she shouted at Amaka. Now there was a bucket used by the palace guards to feed Princess Amaka drinking water through a long scope as her hands were bound by chains. Precious in anger sighted this bucket and hurled it at her sister Amaka, pouring her with water. Immediately the water poured on Princess Amaka. She burst out laughing again. Ha ha ha! Thank you, baby sister, that splash of water was refreshing. I haven't had a good bath ever since you threw me in here to rot. Very thoughtful of you to help me out now. Ha ha ha! As Princess Amaka laughed, Precious stared at her in disgust. And then, in a mocking tone, replied Amaka, "So, sister, it would seem like the short time you've spent in here has really done a number on your brain. Given the fact that you now find breathing air the funniest thing on the planet. I have to say, to be honest, I thought it would take at least a year before you would have completely gone mental. But it looks like I underestimated your foolishness now, didn't I? Ha ha ha! I guess you did, Princess Amaka," answered Precious and kept on laughing. Ha ha ha! Precious, in genuine annoyance, now gripped her fist and started shouting. "Come on, have some dignity. This is pitiful," she said. "Ha ha ha, and why would I do that?" Princess Amaka immediately replied her. Precious then responded, "Because even though you are an inferior beast of a princess, you are still a princess, and this the sudden deranged laugh strips that honor away from you." Nonsense! Why are you lying? Deep down we both know that the real reason you are angry is because I am no longer validating your hatred of me. And you can't stand it. Now can you? Amaka said to her. "What did you just say to me?" Precious immediately responded in shock. Then Princess Amaka raised her head, looked up to her, with a sinister smirk on her face, and kept talking. "Your need for validation is the reason you brainwashed Dad to love you and hate me instead of throwing him in here with me. I mean, if you really hate me, 'cause Dad and Mom used to shower me with more love than you, then shouldn't your anger be focused on them?" When Precious heard this, she broke down in despair, falling to her knees and shouting, "Stop talking! You don't know anything! Shut up!" she shouted, as she covered her ears with her hands and closed her eyes. She then screamed for the second time, "It's all your fault, you beast! Everything is your fault!" Then Princess Amaka immediately responded to Precious. "You keep saying that, but the moment you walked in here I had you tagged in seconds. What are you blabbing about?" Precious desperately asked. Then Princess Amaka replied, "Your shoes, little sister. You know, when you walked in, I couldn't place my finger on the reason they felt so familiar. Nostalgic, in fact. At first I wasn't sure, but now after hearing you go on and on and on, I now understand what you are all about." "You don't understand anything, monster!" Precious immediately responded to Amaka. Amaka then replied to her, "Those shoes, they belonged with our dead mother, don't they? Lovely Queen Zainab of blessed memory. Or in other words, Mother. How dare you bring my mother into this?" Princess Precious furiously asked. "She was my mother too," Princess Amaka responded. "Then if you feel that way, you wouldn't have brought her into this." Precious instantly responded to Amaka. Princess Amaka then replied, "I brought her up because you are wearing her shoes with your filthy blood-stained legs. I brought her up because I now understand that even as twisted as you have become, and even as you hate me, you still have a great love for Mom and Dad. And that's why Daddy isn't in here with me rotting. I brought our mother up because I know that if she were still alive and saw you like this, what you have become, and all you have done to achieve your flimsy goal, she would be greatly disappointed and heartbroken." After Amaka finished talking, She paused and stared into the eyes of Precious, who was looking right back into her own eyes. There was a brief silence. Then Precious started talking. "You animal. You sure have some nerve bringing up our mother like that. And for what? To try to use her memory to try to plan with my emotions, in the desperate hope that I would see the error of my ways and release you? Well, think again. I have no sympathy for the likes of you," she said. Then immediately Princess Amaka asked her, "So if that is the case, then what are you doing here, Precious? If you don't want to have a heartfelt conversation, then why did you come to this cellar to see me? Why have you engaged me in this long, unfulfilling banter for minutes now? What exactly are you doing here?" Almost immediately Precious looked at Amaka with an aggrieved face and then began talking. "Do you really want to know? The reason I came here is to remind you that I'm out here and you are inside that cell, and that is never going to change. The reason I am here is to tell you that I have killed your little boyfriend Dyke, thus extinguishing any hopes of love you had." "No, it can't be. You couldn't have. You monster!" Princess Amaka shouted almost immediately and began sobbing. "Yes, that's right, he is gone," Princess Precious replied to her sister's groans. And then she continued her monologue. "I came here to remind you that this is how things are always going to be. You are going to be. I am always going to be better than you, always going to be smarter, faster. You never had a chance of being the ruler of our land, because I have always existed." Princess Amaka, who had been sobbing for her lover Dyke's supposed death, couldn't stomach Princess Precious's yapping anymore and then began shouting, "Get out! Get out! Get out of my sight, you evil monster!" she exclaimed. Then Precious retaliated and also screamed, "Keep your mouth shut, you animal! You are the one in chains here, you wild animal! And for your information, so that we get everything on the record, I am not the evil one here. You are. You always have been the problem. And I am sick and tired of you always trying to take the moral high ground with our squabbles when you are the sole reason why Mom died. What did you just say to me? Have you gone delusional, you evil girl? What are you even talking about? And how am I the reason why Mom died?" Princess Amaka forced out questions through her mouth that was extremely dry from wailing at Precious. Precious then replied to her, "I don't believe it. So Daddy never told you? And I guess you never cared to find out what really happened. The night Mom died." As she said this, Princess Amaka was stunned by her words, and she was trapped in the feeling between anger, sorrow, and confusion. But Princess Precious would continue talking to her regardless. "Well, since this would be the last time I would be coming down to this hellhole to see you, I rather do you my last respects and inform you of what really happened that night. That night on your 13th birthday, that was when it all happened." As Princess Amaka heard the words of Precious, in that very moment, all she could feel was hatred, but she paid keen attention to what Precious was saying. Precious would continue talking. "That night, while you were sleeping, the Oshimaries came to the palace on a mission. They called it the Absolution. I was restless that night because I had overhead father and some palace guards discussing about getting ready for an invasion of the palace in the middle of the night. This continued till deep into the night when the Oshimaries arrived in front of the palace gates. Almost immediately, Father rushed out of the palace to confront them, and they all got into a heated argument. The Oshimaries declared that they wanted your head, since that was the night of your 13th birthday, the time you were supposed to be initiated into the Oshimarie brother, if you were to be a man. Father had tried to bargain with them to spare your life, at some point even offering to die in your place. But the warriors refused. They pushed Father, King David, aside and marched into the palace gates. I could see Father from my bedroom window that night screaming an order to the palace guards to defend the entrance to the palace at all costs. "Defend those walls until the last man, my servants," Father screamed. And almost immediately, the Oshimaries and the palace guards got into a huge battle, right in front of the palace entrance. Unfortunately, this battle would only last for a few minutes, as I witnessed the Oshimary warriors lay waste to the palace guards like they were mere chickens. That was when I knew that those weren't ordinary warriors. They were something else. And from the unsurprised expression I saw on Father's face after the battle, he was fully aware of what and who those warriors were. The warriors then marched into the palace to search for you, as nothing was left to stop them. But then that was when it happened. Mother rushed out of the palace entrance and offered to die in your place to serve as the sacrificial lamb for their absolution ritual. I was gripped with great shock when I saw them accept her offer, knowing fully well that they rejected the same offer from Dad. And in shortly after they discussed, the leader of the Oshimaries at the time struck Mother down with his sword, and that was the end of our mother. She died because she wanted you to live. But Father told me a bunch of scoundrels who tried to rob the palace killed her. Why would he lie to me? Princess Amaka asked in desperation, as she was shocked at the story her sister had just told her. Because she knew about the Oshimaries from the stories her parents told her. And she knew about her curse. So everything was plausible. But before she could gather her thoughts, Precious said finally to her, "Ever since that day, I have hated you. I have hated you for Mother's death. I have hated you for being born, and I have hated the fact that Father and Mother always had to risk everything and give up everything just to protect you. You are a cancer to this family, and I'm glad I can finally put you behind us. I won't kill you because of Mother's sake. I would not let her death be in vain. Goodbye, sister," Precious said as she walked out of Amaka's presence. As Precious was leaving, Amaka began shouting, "Wait, stop please, Precious!" She screamed as she struggled to unbound herself from her chains, but to no avail. All she could feel was a flood of sorrowful emotions. She had lost everything so fast. Dyke, her throne, her father's love, all within a blink of an eye. Now Princess Precious just dropped this bomb on her, about the reality of her mother's death. It was all too much on her. She felt like crying out her eyes until she vomited. But then her mind began racing to a time in her past when she had felt similar emotions. And then she remembered the day when she and Elizabeth stopped being friends all of a sudden without any explanation from Elizabeth on why she wasn't interested in the friendship anymore. Just cold withdrawal. And coincidentally, as she was thinking back to this time, Elizabeth, who was miles away from her at the Agba evil forest, was equally thinking back to this time when she cut Princess Amaka off, without telling her the full story. As Elizabeth recalled this moment, she instantly made up her mind to tell Dyke everything he wanted to know, to avoid cutting off another friend without any explanation. So almost immediately she stopped walking behind him and shouted, "Dyke, wait! Stop!" Elizabeth screamed. "And why should I do that?" Dyke asked in a sarcastic voice. "Because I am ready to tell you the full truth irrespective of what you might think of me after." Elizabeth responded, "All right, I'm all ears. This better be one hell of an explanation." Then Elizabeth began talking. My name is Elizabeth Joyce. Joyce is my surname, but my mother's maiden name has always been kept a secret because of her family's past. My past. My mother's maiden name is Apama, and I am a direct descendant of King Mobu, the king your great ancestor Odimba helped defeat. This is my story, Elizabeth said in a dramatic voice. Immediately Dyke's face was struck with great fear and shock. But he wasn't the only one in the kingdom who got a shock that moment. Miles away back at the royal palace, as Princess Precious was walking out of the passageway that led to Amaka's prison, Agatha appeared to her in a sort of dreamlike revelation. What is this? Is this real? Princess Precious asked Agatha's manifestation. Agatha then responded, Ha ha ha, of a truth it is I, Agatha, the strongest witch doctor in all the land, and I have come to warn you. My niece Elizabeth is on her way with a hunter to deep inside the Agba evil forest. Aha, so that's where she is, Precious responded. But isn't that the same forest my sister Amaka and Dike the hunter were going to find Amaka a cure before I stopped them with the Oshimaries? She said to herself, but shrugged it off and then with a suspicious demeanor asked Agatha, But great Agatha, why did you go through all this trouble to give me this information? How does telling me the location of your niece benefit you? Or am I missing something? Precious asked. Agatha then laughed in an evil tone. Ha 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 ha. Foolish princess, my niece and the hunter are on a mission to find the sacred shrine of eggs, deep in the Agba evil forest. If they are successful, they would be able to wish away my enchantment on your father the king, and you would be instantly exposed. You must stop them, Precious, or else. Stop them. Stop them. Stop them, Agatha said as her manifestation disappeared into thin air. Immediately Princess Precious was gripped with fear because of Agatha's warning. So she stormed out of the palace and met with Farouk, who had been waiting for her outside the palace. She informed him of everything Agatha said and asked him to call his warriors so they could hunt down Precious and Dike before they reached the Shrine of Eggs. But Farouk responded to her, My love, even if I were to send for my men, it would take till tomorrow morning before they arrived, for where our camp is far and the men had probably reached there by now. Oh, for the God's sake, we don't have that time, she said out loud. Farouk then suggested, My love, why don't you and I go on this mission ourselves? Surely I can best the hunter in combat and kill him with my bare hands if it were to come to that. And from your descriptions, the Elizabeth girl is as weak as they come, so the two of us could take them, he said to her in a confident voice. Precious then responded in a hopeful and desperate tone. Very well, let us go now. So they took 2 of the best horses the palace had with a few weapons and charged in the direction of the path leading to the Agba evil forest. As they rode, they had one objective in mind, and that was to find and kill both Elizabeth and Dike so as to them from using the mystical eggs in the forest to break Agatha's enchantment of the king. Thank you for watching this story. I am grateful for all who waited for part 4. We are almost at the end of this beautiful story. The Big Muscular Princess is a 5-part story. You have seen the first 4 parts, remaining the 5th and final part, and it will come to an end. If you would like me to make a part 5 and conclude this thrilling saga, comment part 5 in the comments and share this video with your friends and family. Also, like and subscribe to the channel so that you'll be the first to be notified when I drop a new video. Thanks again for watching and have a lovely day.